This is the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the first podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Featuring insight from Arkansas baseball color analyst Bubba Carpenter. Here's Matt Jones.
We record this podcast on Wednesday mornings, and I don't know, about midway through the first inning, Bubba, I thought about texting you last night and asking you if you thought the game would be over by the time it was time to record this podcast this morning. An hour-long first inning as Arkansas beats UALR 21-5 on Tuesday night. I think it was not quite an hour. It was like 54 minutes. You could have driven from Fort Smith to Fayetteville during the time it took that first inning to play. I can't remember maybe but one other game, and it was Arkansas-St. Louis in 2010. And the final score of that one was 32-8. I can't remember very many games though where you have a first inning go that long. It was something else.
You know, it was a long one, Matt. I can't remember how many batters came up in the first inning either. I'm sure you got the stats.
Yeah, it was 14 for Arkansas.
14, because I know Tavian made it out, and it was like 11 or 12 consecutive batters. Yeah, yep. I mean, it was crazy. So, but, you know, I will attribute a lot of that to Razorbacks just having, good patient at bats. I mean, part of it was just, the ULR pitchers just couldn't throw it over the plate. But, I'm still amazed at how patient our hitters are, and they're not going to expand the zone. They're going to make you come to them, and they showed it last night in the first inning. But yeah, it was funny. Phil got a text from Bob Holt saying asking if we needed a second inning stretch, and so I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, certainly could have used one. That was a marathon first inning. That St. Louis game that I mentioned in 2010, it's ironic because Chris Curry, the Little Rock coach, was an assistant coach on that Arkansas team, so he was there for both of those games that are in my mind. In 2010 against St. Louis, though, Arkansas sent 18 to the plate in the first inning, scored 14 first inning runs, and I think the first 12 of the inning got on base. Those kind of games, they pad the stats, and it's good to win, but at a certain point, you start to feel bad for the other team.
Well, you really do, and I said it on the broadcast last night. I just want everyone to know that's not a representation of the UALR program or what Chris Curry's built. I mean, he's built a really good program there. He's done a great job, and he's got some really good players. We saw some of their at-bats last night. They hit some balls hard last night. Pitchers left it over the middle plate. They hit it hard. It was just one of those things where, we talk about hitting being contagious, and pitching being contagious, but so's walking. I mean, you get out there and one guy starts walking people, the next guy comes in, next thing he can't throw a strike, and it's really just contagious from that point on. And that's what we saw happen last night. But I tell you what, it's still a good UALR team, and I'm sure tonight we're going to see a lot better performance out of them.
UALR is 6-3 in the Ohio Valley Conference. They're in third place in that conference. And, you talk about walking is contagious on a pitching side. I think it can probably come pretty contagious on a hitting side to go up there and be patient when you see what the guy in front of you is doing, the way that they were able to do over and over again in that game last night. I believe it was Arkansas had 15 hits. They walked 13 times, and 7 of those walks were in the first inning.
Yeah, I mean, it was and I talked to Peyton Holt after the game. He was a player of the game that I chose to interview, and I asked him about that. His first couple of at bats he got base hits, and then his last 2 at bats he drew walks, and I just asked him about the team's patience at the plate and how, if it's hard in a game like that, because everyone wants to hit. You want to pad your stats. At the same time, though, you don't want to swing at a bad pitch. If you expand the zone, then you make it out. And so, but I'm just so impressed with the offense and their patience at the plate and how they continue to go out and just really grind out at bats. And it doesn't matter, Matt, if it's a 0-0 game or a 21-5 game. They just don't give up at bats, and that's what makes that lineup so tough and so dangerous.
One of the big stories out of the game last night was that Jared Wagner was injured. Wagner, I'm sorry. I can't write down Wagner like you do, Bubba, in your scorebook. But Jared Wagner was injured. We think it was his left thumb that he hurt sliding into third base. Just kind of slid over the base. He had to kind of hang on to it with his backhand, and we think that's where he injured himself. We don't know what his status is going to be. Dave Van Horn said after the game that It wouldn't surprise him with how tough Wagner is, as if he is back in the lineup tonight against UALR. But said they're certainly going to be cautious with him, and they should be. But I wonder from a hitting perspective, and also from a fielding perspective, to have that thumb on your glove hand, or that, the thumb on your bottom hand when you're batting, how do you think that affects him? And, not knowing the severity of the injury, just what do you think are some of the things they might be looking through right now with him?
Well, I'd say from a hitting perspective, it's better that it's his left thumb versus his right. If it's your top hand thumb, I mean, it's hard to control the barrel of that bat if your top hand thumb's got something wrong with it. So from a hitting perspective, it's better that it is the left thumb. From a catching perspective, yeah, you can make it work. You're an outfielder. You can gut through that if there's an issue there. When Peyton Stovall he hurt his thumb. I don't know, early in the season. It was his left thumb he had hurt, and it was his top hand on the bat because he hits left-handed, obviously. So I know talking to him, he said that it was worse for him catching the ball than it was hitting. But then it took him a little bit to get his top hand strength back because he was fouling off a lot of balls to the left side because he didn't have top hand. And so, but Jared's tough. Let's just hope it's nothing. There's nothing broken there. Hopefully they got an X-ray last night. We'll get some good news today. But I know he's a guy that's going to want to be in the lineup today. Whether or not DVH will put him in there, that's another story. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see on that. But boy, you hope he's okay because he's the heartbeat to the middle of that lineup.
Yeah, a real difference maker. D1 Baseball, by the way, named him a midseason All-American last week. He's leading Arkansas in a lot of offensive categories. Borfin's their top hitting average guy, but after that, it's Wagner is up there in a lot of things, whether it be RBI, home runs, OPS. He's been really good for Arkansas. One of the things that's first off, before we finish discussion about UALR, I got to ask you about sitting in the hog pen last night. How many hot dogs did you have offered to you? How many beers did you drink? Just paint the picture for me sitting in the outfield.
Okay, well, first of all, we know, Matt, that we've got the best baseball fans in the country, and that's kind of that's where it all starts, right there in the hog pen. And it was so much fun. To answer your question, I didn't get any hot dogs offered to me. Had a whole lot of drinks offered to me, though. But you'd be proud of me. I said no. I didn't. There was no Harry Carey stuff going on last night out in the hog pen. But we had a good time, man. It was so much fun out there. Get to talk to some of the fans between innings. Of course, now with the clock, you don't have a whole lot of time to socialize. Fortunately, I could take my headset off a little bit and mingle some. Where Phil's got to stay engaged. But it was a good time, and it's neat to be out there. And so for me, Phil was talking about how hard it was, that view for him, because everything's reversed.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I played a lot of center field. So for me, I was at home right there. That's the view that I'm used to seeing. For me, when I first went up in the booth, I had a hard time up in the booth looking at the field from that vantage point. But last night, it was like being back at home, being out there in center field, and it was so much fun. I really appreciate Justin letting us do that, and the Razorbacks allowing that, because we really had a good time. I think the fans enjoyed it, and it was a fun game. It was a fun game to be out there in center field. It was a long one, but it was fun. And as long as we're winning 21-5, I'll stay there all night. So, but it really was a lot of fun.
Looked like Harold Cole's home run ball almost hit you on the table.
Well, okay, it wasn't as close as it looked. It was several feet off to the left. I told Phil that if one came out there, I was going to get my bat out and try to hit it. Well, first Phil started saying he was going to try to bunt the ball back out on the field, and I was afraid he's going to get hurt. So I thought I'd take charge. And but yeah, I was all tangled up in my cord. The ball was hit, and I was all tangled up, and I couldn't move. But it would have been really cool had it been about 20 feet over to the left. I might have been able to make a play on it.
That's the worst feeling, when the cord gets tangled around your foot. The first high school football game that I ever called, or I'm sorry, it was not the first one I ever called, but it was the first one that I called for Fayetteville High School. We were in St. Louis, and Fayetteville, it was real hot. First game of the year, probably like 95 degrees, and they didn't have enough room for us in the press box. So we were actually on a folding table up in the visitor stands. The parents were like sitting around us, and the opening kickoff of the second half, Fayetteville takes it back for like a 97-yard touchdown or something. And, there's that moment on a kickoff return where it's going to happen and you get excited. Well, I'd been sitting down because, it's hot and you're trying to hydrate. And so he's going down the sideline. I stand up and I'm standing on the court and my headset flies off and I catch it and put it back on and finish the call. But I don't know that anybody knew where he was between about the 40 and the 30. So I get your pain there. It's interesting when you sit out in the middle of people. I like doing that during the super regionals and the regionals here at Baum because the press box is not very big. Also, the air conditioner is not very good during the summertime. And so I like sitting out there, kind of in the middle when they put those risers out on the concourse. It's a lot of fun sitting out there in the middle of people during games.
Oh, it really is. It was a lot of fun. I'd love to be out there during the Tennessee series. I know it'll be crazy out there, but I already got a really hard no on that. So we'll be back up in the booth this weekend. But it was a good experience, and I was glad we got a chance to do it.
Yeah, that Tennessee series is going to be a wild one this weekend, and we'll preview it here a little bit later. Uh, Bubba, one of the things that stood out to me about midweek games is that last night you had Wagner start, you had Josenberger start, Borfin started, Diggs came in and played. But for the most part, what we're seeing a lot on the midweeks is that these players who aren't getting much time on the weekends, they're the ones playing and they're producing. The offense really is not taking a step back with these backup players getting their playing time during these midweek games. And we've mentioned this before, or I've said this, is that I think this offense, if you took all of the backups and you put them in and you gave them a pretty good pitching staff, I think this could be a regional type team with the backups in those starting spots, and they're making the most of their playing time in these midweek games.
Oh, absolutely, man. I tell you, I think it's awesome. I got a chance to talk to, like I said, Peyton Holt last night, and he's a player that I love watching play. And it's crazy to think that had he not strained his hamstring a few weeks ago, he might be the guy starting at third base right now over Caleb Cowley. Caleb's kind of come forward and taken charge of that position, but there for a few days it was Peyton Holt's position. I mean, he came in off the bench, earned the spot there, made some really good plays. He made some great plays last night at second base. Some really athletic plays, almost turned a ridiculous double play, had a couple big hits, a couple walks. Um, Jason Jones is another one. Every time when Jason Jones comes up to the plate, I stop what I'm doing and I'm like, okay, something good's getting ready to happen right here. I just love it when he hits the ball. Ball makes a different sound off of his bat. Him and Harold Cole both. Um, Hunter Grimes is a guy that goes up there and just grinds out at bats. He's so much fun to watch. I watch him in pregame taking fly balls, and he works so hard out in the outfield taking fly balls at multiple positions. Reese Robinette's another one. I mean, I could go on down the list and talk about every player, but you're right. There's so much talent on the bench, and it really says a lot to the depth of this team. Where you could plug these guys in, and you really wouldn't lose a whole lot. I think a couple of them defensively, you might drop off a little bit. And that's probably why they're not in the starting lineup. But there's so much depth on the team, and it really is fun to watch them play. And I say it all the time, Matt. The thing that everyone loves the run rule, and I talked about it last night. We'd been out in the outfield for a long time. I don't even know how long the game was. I don't care. I told Phil, I said I would gladly stay for two more innings to see a few more guys get in the game, like Cooper Dawsett was warming up. I'd love to see Cooper come in and pitch an inning. That's the only bad thing about the run rule, the 7 inning run rule, is these guys lose out on chances to get at bats late in games where normally, they'd get in there and get at bats. That's the only problem with the run rule, but I get why we do it, but it's got its pluses and its minuses.
Yeah, I feel like it probably affects the pitchers more than it does the hitters. The hitters, they're getting their turns. I mean, Davian Josenberger was up at the plate 3 times in the first 2 innings last night. But, and I think maybe we're seeing that late in these games in SEC play, like on a Sunday, where the bullpen is getting a little bit shorter. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Ole Miss. Arkansas wins 2 of 3 in Oxford. Ole Miss isn't playing very well. They lost to Memphis last night. That's a team that it's going to be really surprising if they turn things around and get to the NCAA regional. But that said, going to Ole Miss and winning is always notable. Arkansas has won its last 2 series there, and that had not happened since 2008 and 2010, where they won back-to-back series at Swayze. They went 11-2 in the opener. They play a doubleheader Thursday's game gets rained out. They have to play Friday afternoon. They win 11-2. They lose 7-4 that night, and then they come back and they win 6-4 in the finale. Just broadly speaking, Bubba, what were your takeaways from Oxford?
Well, anytime you go down to Oxford, just ways you feel and win a series, it's a good thing. You know, greedy part of me wants a sweep. I would have thought for sure with Hagen Smith on the mound, we were going to win that second game, but things just didn't go our way. But I tell you what, to win 2 out of 3, is pretty impressive. And I don't care. You look at Ole Miss's record. I still say when we come into town, you could throw the record out the window. They're a good team. They've got a lot of good players left over from last year's national championship team.
Mm-hmm.
Can't figure it out. I can't put my finger on what happened. I remember when they came to town last year, they were scuffling, and I remember looking at their lineup thinking, wow, this is a good team. How are they not winning? Now, this year they dug themselves a really big hole, and I agree with you. I don't know that they can dig out of it. I don't think that they play with a lot of passion. So I listened to the games. I listened all weekend, but then I went back and watched the highlights, and they just don't look like a real. I call it a tired team. They don't play with a lot of energy. They don't make the routine plays. I don't know. There's just something missing from that team, and I don't know if it's the leadership of a Tim Elko, but something about that team. They just don't seem like a good team.
Yeah, they lost so many players. They returned some players, but they lost a lot of good players off that team. Guys like Elko. I thought Hayden Dunhurst, their catcher, was a real glue guy for them last season. There were some guys in the pitching staff that they lost, and then they're not getting production from some of these returners like you thought they would. I mean, Peyton Chatagnier, who's a good, maybe even great defensive second baseman for Ole Miss, he was batting 0.59 in SEC play coming into that series against Arkansas. Didn't do real well. TJ McCants is an outfielder who has been a starter for them for multiple seasons. He's not playing well. We saw that on a few occasions against the Razorbacks. They're just not getting that production from the players that you thought they would. Gonzalez is doing well. Kemp Alderman's doing well. But I think the projections for Ole Miss was that, okay, they've got 5-6 players back who were real guys for them offensively last year when they won the national championship, and maybe only half of those guys are producing. And then you've got the injury to Hunter Elliott, their number one starter, and that's had a big effect on them too. The pitching is not the Ole Miss pitching that I think we're used to seeing.
No, it's not. But with everything you just said, look at Arkansas. I mean, we've had more injuries. We lost more players last year.
And I want to get into this.
Yeah, and so I mean, hey, look what we're doing right now. It's amazing what we're able to do right now. I mean, we're in first place in the West. We're 8-4 in the conference. 26-6 or something like that right now. I mean, I think it's amazing what DVH and the staff has been able to do, to be honest, because you can say the same thing you just said about Ole Miss, about our team, and we're winning. We're finding ways to win, and that's what good teams do.
Yeah, Joe Healy's a friend of mine who works at D1 Baseball. He wrote a really good column last weekend. It was Arkansas and the art of finding a way. And it was basically saying that, and it's stuff that you and I have talked about. The stats, they don't, on paper, it doesn't look like Arkansas should have the record that it has. Arkansas shouldn't be leading the SEC West by a half game, but they just do a great job of adapting to, whatever character the game takes on. And, they've won. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's not about being pretty. It's not about, wowing everyone with your stats. It's about, do you have one more run than the other team at the end of the game? And they've done a great job of that. And I think you have to credit the coaching staff for finding a way to win these games.
Absolutely. And, I go back to a quote from Joe Torre a long time ago, talking about the analytics and all that. And I know I've told you this before, Matt, but the game has a heartbeat. And you can look at the stats, you can look at all the analytics, but at the end of the day, those guys go out and play, and our guys go out and play Razorback baseball, and Razorback baseball wins. And I think I actually sent out a tweet about that article you're referring to, because we're finding a way to win, and I call it Razorback baseball, and it wins.
Let's talk about the pitching rotation, because Arkansas went to Ole Miss and they went Hunter Holland, TBA. Now, part of that was because Will McIntyre had come down with the flu. They wanted to give him an extra. First off, they wanted to see if he could even pitch. Then they wanted to give him as much rest time as they possibly could, so they held him for game 3, and they start Hagen Smith, I'm sorry, in game 2 against Ole Miss. Holland pitched well, got a lot of run support, so he was able to eat up quite a few innings for him. Smith, Van Horn said after the game that for Hagen Smith, it was just an average performance. It wasn't a bad performance, but it was just, it wasn't a dominating performance either from him. McIntyre, it seemed like he played with fire throughout that game, but man, he really gutted it out and gave him 4 2/3 innings. And I think from a starting pitching perspective, it was a decent weekend for him. Certainly much better than they had the week before against Alabama. I wonder, and I assume Hagen Smith's going to go back to the bullpen, but how does it change his pitching staff when Hagen Smith is starting the way he did in that game? And do you think there might be a temptation to put him back in the rotation moving forward?
I don't know. I thought a lot about it over the weekend, Matt, and I think if we'd have had the regular rotation, had Will McIntyre not had the flu, and he throws that second game, I think we sweep the series. And and it's just because Hagen is so valuable. Yeah, he's great as a starter, but I'm kind of growing to like his role as the high leverage guy. When we need him, we bring him in, whether it be on a Friday game or Saturday, or if he doesn't get used Friday or Saturday, then he can start Sunday. But I just like him in that role. It's nice having him as kind of your ace in the hole back there, that you can bring in when you need some big outs. And I don't know. I just feel like it had Will thrown that second game, we win it, and then we go on and sweep the series.
Of course, Arkansas is going to get Brady Tigert back hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's going to affect how they use their pitchers. Gage Wood has really come on strong here lately. We saw him in the last game against Alabama, got the final 4 outs of that game, and then a 3 inning save against Ole Miss the other day. And he pitched around some danger in that game too. I know Gonzalez got a bloop single that got a run in against him, but otherwise he pitched pretty well even in those situations where he had maybe dug himself a little bit of a hole.
Well, I think what's helped Gage is the ability to go out there and get a few extra innings under his belt. He looked great. If you think about his outing, the 3 innings, 3 hits, 1 run, he got better every inning. By his third inning, his stuff was nasty. He could really start to see he was getting a feel for his pitches. And that breaking ball, who was it? Shotney struck out the end of the game.
Yes,
that was nasty. That was a dirty breaking ball, but what I like is he's got that slider going now. For a while he was kind of a 2-pitch guy, fastball, curveball. And even though there's a huge difference in the speed, his fastball is, 93 to 95. That breaking ball, it's more of a 12-6 breaking ball it's around 75 miles an hour. So you're looking at close to 20-mile-an-hour difference in those 2 pitches. But if you've only got a game plan for 2 pitches as a hitter, it's pretty easy. It really is. And those pitches have 2 different looks, and so you can see the breaking ball, but they don't realize how much it breaks. But now that he's got that slider, so he's a 3-pitch guy now, it's a lot tougher. It just makes it harder on the hitters, and you can see that's making his other 2 pitches better by being able to land that slider in there. And so, and look, Gage is a guy that he's been a starter his whole life. So.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy, when we need a starter, maybe later in the year, if we get his pitch count up a little bit, he could go in there and start and give you a few good solid innings at the start of a game.
Well, he's not lacking confidence, is he?
Oh my goodness, he's full of confidence, and I love it for a freshman. Of course, you're getting to this part of the year. We're into April. These guys, they've been wearing a Razorback uniform for a long time. They're really not freshmen anymore. They played the whole fall or spring, and so they're they're getting it figured out right now. But no, he's not lacking for confidence, and that's what you want. If a guy coming in and out of the pen like that, and I think he really loves that role. He's kind of got a little bit of swagger like a Brady Tigert. I think you have to have a lot of that to come out of the pen in some of those key situations and get outs. You can't be timid about it. You got to be a guy that you're the man when you step up on that mound. You got to bow your neck and find a way to get it done. And Gage Wood is just full of confidence, and I love it.
Yeah, these freshman pitchers, they're full of great quotes too. After the Alabama series, he said they nutted it up and won.
Well, you know me, I love that one.
I figured you would. Yeah, we're having fun listening to some of these freshman pitchers this year. It's interesting how the game can go differently because you mentioned Chatagnier striking out against him at the end of the game. He batted against him in the 7th inning too. And I mean, he came maybe 6 feet from hooking one down the left field line for a 2-run homer. It just went a little left of the foul pole. And I was impressed with Gage's ability to come back from that pitch because I feel like a lot of times that could shake the confidence of a pitcher, even though it had, it was something that had gone his way. Chatagnier was sitting on his pitches there, and he was able. I think Chatagnier ends up walking in that situation, but Wood was still able to maybe slow things down enough to get out of that inning. They were up 5-3 when he took the mound. Ole Miss scored the run on the Gonzalez hit, but he was still able to get out of that inning with a 5-4 lead.
Well, you're right. And then he made an adjustment. Next time he faced him, he just carved him up. But everyone says when someone hits a home run foul like that, they're like, "Oh, it's just a long strike." Well, it is, but then at the same time, it isn't. It says a lot about what that hitter's looking for, and it kind of gives you a hint into how you can get him out. And so I thought it was good. I think Gage made a great adjustment. He stuck with it, and the next time he faced him, he carved him up.
Caleb Cali had a good weekend against Ole Miss, ends up hitting 2 home runs there. Went 2 for 3, 3 runs scored in the finale. Played good defense, started a couple of double plays. Arkansas turned 6 double plays. That was a season high for him on a weekend. And the thing that stood out to me, Bubba, and I wonder if it did for you too, is that Cali has been a guy who all season, or for a lot of the early part of the season, maybe has been a pull hitter. And 3 of his 4 hits against Ole Miss were either middle away or the other way. And it seems like maybe that's an indication that he's staying through the zone a little bit more with his bat.
I think so. You can see his bat path so much better. He was kind of pulling off early in the year. If you look back at Globe Life Field, he was pulling off the ball really bad. His bat's flying out of the zone, and he was getting just carved up with fastballs and sliders away. Now he's doing a good job of staying on those balls. A couple of those balls he hit out, the one to right field and the one to center field off the batter's eye. I mean, he stayed on those balls and hammered them. And even his outs, Matt, have been hard outs, deep outs or hard hit balls. And so he's really cut down on his strikeouts. And a big part of it, though, it goes back to, you talk about the freshman pitchers and their confidence. Caleb steps up to the plate right now with a different look. His body language, his demeanor, everything about him is different. And as a result, I think he's going out and playing better defense because they feed off of each other. I don't care what you say. When you're hitting the ball well, you do everything else better. And that's what we see out of Caleb Cali right now.
Since April 1st, Arkansas has played 6 games. He's been the starter in all 6 of those. He's got 3 multi-hit games. He's hit 3 home runs. I think he's got 5 RBI during that time, and he's raised his batting average 42 points. And we've talked about this, and it was interesting to hear Dave Van Horn even mention this last weekend. There's something about the confidence, I think, that a player gains from just being in the lineup every day. It's, hey, the coaches have enough confidence in me to put me in here, and maybe that's raising his level of play. His confidence is going up on the field.
Oh yeah, it's huge. If you, as a player, just coming to the field every day knowing your name's going to be in the lineup is a different feeling than coming and saying, "Okay, well, I hope I'm in there today." I mean, it's a good feeling, and yeah, I don't know. It's one of those mental things, and it's hard to really describe, but it's just a feeling that when you walk in the clubhouse, boom, I'm in the lineup. I'm hitting here. I'm playing here. Let's go get them. It's a different feeling.
And then, real quick, defensively from the Ole Miss series, I thought that was the best defense Arkansas's played. Mentioned the double plays. They had 6 double plays last weekend. They had 5 double plays combined in their 3 previous SEC weekends against Auburn, LSU, and Alabama. They didn't commit an error. I think they had committed 6 errors in the previous 3 SEC weekends. And, when you needed a big defensive play, it was there, whether it be a double play. You had Jared Wagner's diving catch in left field for the first out of the 9th inning. Josenberger had a couple of really big defensive plays where he showed his speed and his range, able to run down a ball. Peyton Stovall at second base probably took away 3 different hits, including some RBI hits, with the way that he was shifted over toward the grass or playing back on the grass. It was as good of a defensive weekend, I think, as we've seen yet from the Razorbacks.
I think so. And you look a couple of Peyton Stovall's early in the game, he robbed a couple of hits early in the game. If those balls get through, some of those games might turn out different because how one out can be so important in an SEC game. And so those were huge. And then, yeah, you mentioned Jared Wagner, Tavian in the outfield in the ninth inning of that last game with Gage on the mound. If either one of those drops, if that ball gets by Jared that he dove for, of course, Tavian was backing him up, so it might not have been extra bases, but it was just a great play. The double plays, though, part of it goes to the guys on defense. Part of it goes to the pitching staff executing pitches.
Mm-hmm.
I say it all the time. As a hitter, you can avoid double plays. Double plays as a hitter, when you hit into a double play, it's because you swung at the wrong pitch or had the wrong timing. That causes a double play. And I think our pitchers are going out there with runners on base and still executing a good pitch and getting that double play ball, and then our defense is taking care of it from there on.
Two of those double plays were against McIntyre. He's been so good at getting those ground ball outs, and those turn into double plays with runners on base. The Whole Hog Baseball Podcast is sponsored by Massage Envy, voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. You can visit Mike and his staff in Tuscany Square at 2603 West Pleasant Grove Road in Rogers, or in Fayetteville at 3557 North Shiloh Drive. Massage Envy has services for everyone. MassageEnvy.com.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
With almost 30 years in business, the Teague Law Firm can help with most family law and criminal law issues. Call James and the Teague Law Firm at 479-531-2785.
Take a look around the SEC this week. We're hitting the midway point. Lots of interesting series, including Arkansas, Tennessee. Arkansas is going to go into the weekend, Bubba, with a half-game lead in the SEC West. And the West race took a little bit of an interesting turn last week because LSU and South Carolina split their series. And we'll talk about that more here in just a minute. But they couldn't play game 3. And so now LSU, they can only play a maximum of 29 SEC games, whereas Arkansas could still play up to 30. That means Arkansas has one more chance for a victory. It comes down to win percentage at the end of the season. And LSU, with some of the struggles that it's having in its bullpen, they've got some injuries that they're facing right now with Garrett Edwards, with Chase Shores. This all of a sudden, I think the West race becomes a little bit more interesting. Granted, Arkansas' schedule is going to get quite a bit harder over the back half of the SEC season.
I think so. I think we got a lucky break, though, on the Thursday night game with all the rain that came in. You and I talked about it earlier, Skeens coming out of the game. Mm-hmm. You said that you wish that you would love to have seen that play out and see what would have ended up happening. I think it was 3-1 when was it 3-1?
Yeah, it was 3-1 in the third inning when the game got delayed because of rain, and then neither he nor Will Sanders, South Carolina's number 1 guy, could come back in.
So yeah, it would have been nice to see that, but that's a break for us. So we'll see what happens. I haven't looked to see who LSU has coming up, but right now we're finding a way to win games. I mean, the fact that we're a half game up in the West is huge right now with all the adversity we've gone through.
LSU hosts Kentucky this weekend. Kentucky had been playing well up until last week when they lost a doubleheader to Georgia, and that was their first series loss of the year. LSU is a great team. They've got a great lineup, but I don't know that they're nearly as dominant as Arkansas was 2 years ago or Tennessee was last season. I don't know that the SEC has that type of team, and if it does have that type of team, I'm not sure it's not Vanderbilt with the way they've been playing here lately and the way that pitching staff is going.
Yeah, too, with Vandy's pitching right now, I mean, they're dominating people and they're scoring runs. And so the way they started off the season, I didn't think Vandy was going to be that good, but boy, they've put it together now. I mean, what are they right now? They're 11-1 in the East and just kind of taking control over there. So we'll see. We'll see as the weeks come along. We'll see if they're the real deal.
Vanderbilt's at home this weekend. They host South Carolina, and Carter Holton, their number one pitcher, has got a little bit of an injury. They're not sure if he's going to be able to go in that series. That's the series of the week. Other series this weekend: Missouri goes to Texas A&M, Ole Miss and Mississippi State in the battle of the last two national champions who may not make the tournament this year. Georgia goes to Florida, Auburn's at Alabama. Mentioned Kentucky's at LSU, and Tennessee is at Arkansas. Bubba, let's talk about LSU South Carolina for one more minute. I was interested to see how South Carolina played that game. It was in Columbia. I'm still not sold on this being a dominant South Carolina team, but the fact that they had LSU on the ropes the way they did made me a little bit more of a believer in them. We mentioned they won game one. They had a couple of home runs against Skeens. I don't think he had given up a home run all season. Game two, though, makes me, I don't know if it makes me more impressed with LSU or if it maybe furthers my doubt in South Carolina. South Carolina has LSU on the ropes. It's 7-3. They have the bases loaded in the seventh inning, no outs. They can't score. And then LSU comes back. It's a 2-out grand slam in the eighth to tie the game 7-7. They score in the ninth, and they get out of there able to even up the series with an 8-7 win. Do you think that says more about LSU than it does South Carolina? I wonder what your thoughts are as you look at the results from that series.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but I will say LSU has a potent lineup, and if you make a mistake to that lineup, they're going to hurt you. And South Carolina is a hitter's ballpark, so you can't make a mistake there to a good a good team. And so I think it's more LSU's offense just being really good. But I'm like you. I'm not 100% sold on South Carolina yet. I'm just not. And we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks if they're for real.
Yeah, South Carolina, I think playing at Vanderbilt, even if Carter Holton can't go this weekend, Vanderbilt is really good across the board pitching. With Owen and Futrell and Maldonado might be the best relief pitcher in the league. They're going to get tested, and they're going to be playing at a different kind of ballpark. It's not going to be at Founders where the ball seems like it's flying out at all hours of the day. Midseason awards. We're at the midpoint of the season. Pitcher of the year in the SEC. Can it be anyone but Paul Skeens?
I think it has to be Skeens. I mean, he's just dominant. I mean, he's your Friday night guy, and so yeah. I mean, it really does have to be him. I'd like to give it to Hunter Holland, just because I've got Razorback goggles on. But it's definitely Paul Skeens.
I just don't think we've seen a pitcher as dominant as Skeens in a long time in the league. If there's one guy who I think might sneak up and challenge him, it's Darren Williams at Kentucky. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery. He's off to a great start this year, but I just don't see anybody beating Skeens, especially with just all the recognition that he has. He's going to be a top 1 or 2 pick in the draft. Also, top 1 or 2 pick in the draft is going to be Dylan Cruz. Is there anybody that can challenge him for player of the year right now?
I don't think so, man. I mean, I think Dylan Cruz is just the real deal. I mean, he really is. I love watching him hit. I love watching him play. I love watching him play baseball. I love watching good baseball players, and everything he does says, major league player. I mean, he's the real deal. So I think that's his.
He leads the SEC and the country in a lot of offensive categories right now, including batting average, runs scored, you name it. He's up there. I would say maybe if there's one player that could sneak up and win that, is Jack Caglione at Florida. He leads the country in home runs. Also, he's thrown like 99 off the mound, and up until last week, he had been really good in those game 3 starts for Florida. I think they're calling him, what was it, like Cagli? Basically, it's some sort of mashup of his name and Shohei Ohtani. Because he's maybe the closest thing to Ohtani that there is in college baseball right now. You just don't see a lot of guys, hitting at 110 off the bat and throwing at 99 off the mound.
Yeah, you don't see that a lot. But you're right. If anyone can challenge Dylan Cruz, I think it's Caglione. So, but I don't know. It's one of those things. I've seen Dylan Cruz play, and I'm just super impressed with him.
I think freshman of the year right now has to be Ethan Petrie at South Carolina. He's 3rd in the league in batting average. He's also, I think, 2nd in home runs behind Caglione. one of the really, really great freshmen in college baseball. He might be the national freshman of the year this season for the Gamecocks. What about coach of the year? Does Dave Van Horn fit into it when you think about the injuries that Arkansas has suffered and the fact that they're leading the West at this point?
Absolutely. When we were talking about today's segment, DVH is, I think he's got to be coach of the year right now because no one else has had to endure what we did. I mean, first of all, to lose as many position players as we did last year, they rebuild the roster. We've 3 huge arms go down for us, and yet we're still finding ways to win. He's pushing all the right buttons. So I think, yeah, him and his staff, for sure. I think DVH is coach of the year at this point.
Yeah, it seems like the coaches, they kind of fall in line with whoever the regular season champion is, and that becomes the coach of the year. But every now and then, they might stray away from that. I think Nick Mingione at Kentucky probably deserves some coach of the year talk, as well as Mark Kingston right now at South Carolina, just for the way that those programs have turned around to this point in the season. And we'll see if they can keep it going as they get over the back half of the season.
As long as you don't say Corbin. Everyone wants to give it to Corbin every year. Give it to Corbin. No, let's don't do that.
If he wins the SEC, he might get it. James Teague has joined his father, Robert, at Teague Law Firm, which has been around nearly 30 years and was voted best of Northwest Arkansas in 2019 and 2021. James can help you with most family law matters, including divorce, custody, and child support. He can also help with criminal law, including felony and misdemeanor offenses. If you have an estate need, James at Teague Law Firm can fill your need there too. Teague Law Firm is a full-service law firm where you will talk to actual lawyers. They will call you back and give you the direct cell number. You can call James and the Teague Law Firm at 479-531-2785. That's 479-531-2785, or visit them online at teague-law.com. The Teague Law Firm, if we can't help you, we'll talk baseball.
As a former Razorback pitcher, James Teague spent years closing innings. Now he's closing cases. With almost 3 decades in business, the Teague Law Firm can help with most family law issues and criminal law. Call James and the Teague Law Firm at 479-531-2785 or visit them at teague-law.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
But it's hard to believe that it's Tennessee week and we're this far into the podcast and we really haven't talked about Arkansas, Tennessee. If you would have asked people before the season, what is the series that they're looking forward to most, it had to be this one. And I think we're expecting huge crowds this weekend, especially Friday and Saturday night. The spring game is Saturday afternoon up at Razorback Stadium. And then, a lot of people are going to come down for that game Saturday night. It's always, when they're able to time it right and the baseball team's in town and the weather's good, that's always one of the huge attendance games. I mean, you look back through the record book and some of the biggest games attendance-wise that Arkansas has ever had outside of the postseason have been the days of the spring football game. And so you throw all that in with Tennessee and what we know about happened 2 years ago, and you see the social media banter back and forth between Arkansas and Tennessee fans. They've been the 2 number 1 seeds in the last 2 NCAA tournaments. This is a big weekend for Arkansas, and I think and for Tennessee, and I feel like whoever wins this series is going to be in part the team that can kind of keep their emotions in check, because I don't think either of them have played this type of series where it's going to be so charged in the ballpark. Maybe Tennessee did against LSU, but Arkansas hasn't this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge, Matt. And it's funny because, so when it comes to, you know how involved I am in youth baseball through the academy and all that. Months and months ago, when the schedule came out, as soon as Tennessee was penciled in on this date, everyone's texting me wanting to come to town and play. There's a big tournament in town this weekend. Everyone's wanting to come play this weekend so they can play their youth games, and then go to Baum Walker and watch Tennessee play. So there's, you mentioned all the other things going on. That's something that's huge right there too. And everyone's penciled this date in from day one, the minute it was added to the schedule. How it was left off the schedule originally, I don't know, but I'm glad the SEC office got it right and got Tennessee back on the schedule. But it's going to be a lot of fun, man. I can't wait for Friday night.
Yeah, it was a big oversight in the fall, and they ended up having to overhaul their schedule and put Arkansas, Tennessee on there because this was their year to play in Fayetteville. The way that the schedule rotation is set several years in advance, it's a series that was not big 2 years ago or until 2 years ago, and then you have the dust up. You have the great series number one, 3-1 run games in Knoxville. Those are the SEC West champion and the SEC East champion that year. Then you got the dust up at the end between Van Horn and Vitello, and you've got the history between them. You got the guys at Tennessee who used to be here, whether it be Tony or Josh Elander. Luke Bonfield is on that staff. How did this thing grow so quickly, do you think, into such a big rivalry in the eyes of the fan bases?
Honestly, I think it came with the incident at home plate between Vitell and DVH. I think that's when they became enemy number one. Before then, it was LSU, Ole Miss. Like for me, it's always been Ole Miss, but now I look at Tennessee and I'm like, wow, we got to beat them. But I think, don't you think that has a lot to do with it?
Oh,
The home plate incident. Everyone, all of a sudden, they want to hate Tennessee now.
I think you're right, but what I think is funny is I think Van Horn and Vitello, and I've heard Dave mention this a number of times, whether it be in discussions with him, in interviews or speaking at the Swatters Club last year, he made a reference to it. He said, "We're fine. We still talk all the time. It's just that one moment seems like that's what other people can't get past."
Well, DVH and Vitell, they're both highly competitive people. I mean, ultra competitive. And that's what happens when you get two guys together that are competitive. I mean, it happens. Now, I think Vitella should have had a little bit more self-control, which that's kind of,
and he'll tell you that.
Yeah. It shouldn't have happened right there. It shouldn't have happened there. And I think Tony's got to be better than that, because you're dealing with the GOAT, you're dealing with DVH, and I just don't think it was handled right. But he's fiery, and if you look back several years ago, DVH was the same way. He could control himself, though, a little bit better than Tony. I guess I shouldn't make that comparison, but you remember back years ago, DVH was really fiery, and boy, he'd get on you really quick. He'd get on those umpires, and he had some meltdowns, but I think he did a little better job of controlling himself. I think Tony goes a little too far with it. I think, with that being said, I honestly think Tony Vitell, I think he embraces being the bad guy, and I think that's something that he likes. He likes the attention, but with it all being said, he's a good coach, he's a good recruiter, and he's really turned that Tennessee program around.
I've heard this people say what you said about Dave and not being as fiery. You go out to a practice, that's the fire is still there. The first practice of the preseason, Caleb Cali did not run out a ball to first base. When he struck out, the ball was in the dirt and they had a runner at third, and Van Horn comes out of the dugout, run, a lot louder than I'm saying it right now, telling him to run, and Callie's kind of look at him, and Van Horn comes out and starts like walking toward him, run, and he runs to first base, and then he gets an earful on the way back about how that's not how we play baseball. You run to first, you make the catcher throw it, he might throw it into right field, and that run comes home from third. And that's one example. There are many examples like that if you go out and you listen to him at practice. I think what's happened, and I think he'll tell you this, is that the replay has changed how animated he gets with umpires, because it was the missed calls, I think, that probably sent him over the edge more and got him ejected in those games early in his career. And we haven't seen him get ejected, I think, in probably 6 years. And that lines up pretty well with when replay started to become really big in baseball.
Well, now, I didn't say it was all butterflies and rainbows with Dave. He still gets fired up. I love watching him on the top step. When an umpire makes a bad call, whether it be a balls and strikes or
he knows how to push the envelope.
He knows exactly how far to go, where Vitella doesn't. Vitella just keeps going and going. Dave knows how far he can push and still get his point across. Hey, you got to do better than that back there. And then he stops. And that just comes with being a veteran coach and being a professional and having self-control.
Yeah, Tony's been ejected from 3 different games in the last, or since the 2019 season. That's the last time that Tennessee came to Fayetteville. That was a great series too. I remember Christian Franklin had a big home run in Game 3 of that series, and Arkansas ends up sweeping Tennessee. That was kind of the year where you could see that the balls were starting, the worm was starting to turn, so to speak, for that program. He got a great reception that weekend. I don't think it's going to be that way this weekend. I think that there may be a little bit of a split, and maybe I'm totally underestimating what it's going to be. But I still think there are people out there who are very appreciative of him and what he did for the program, and maybe they see that, hey, that was just one little heated moment 2 years ago. Then there are going to be the people that are all over him this weekend. I wonder what you think the reception is going to be like for Tony, because it's going to be totally different than what he got when he came to town 4 years ago.
Well, I can say this: if he was playing left field, the hog pen would be all over him. So, but when he gets closer up to the home plate area, I think the fans view him a little different. But if he was out in the hog pen area, I think they'd be all over him about it. But I think people understand, the kind of coach he is. And I do think some people still hold a grudge about the home plate incident. So I think it's going to be, I think you said it, 50-50. I think you're going to hear some boos. You're definitely going to hear some boos, but I think you'll hear some people cheering for him as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I said 50-50. I don't know if it's going to be 50-50. It might be like 80-20 or something like that. Tennessee, let's talk about their team. They're 23-10 overall. They beat Eastern Kentucky last night. They're 5-7 though in the SEC. And when you think about how good they were last year, I think they were 25-5 in the SEC. And so to see them, struggling, if you will, the way they have in SEC play has been really interesting to me. They get swept weekend 1 at Missouri. That game is going to haunt them all season long. I think just kind of with the way that team is tracking right now, I think they're tracking toward being, maybe they're on the bubble to host a regional at the end of the season. And the Missouri series is going to be one that it's going to be a stink that you can't wash off necessarily, because Missouri hadn't played well since that point. They did sweep A&M the next week, and then they've gone 1-2 the past 2 weekends. They were at LSU 2 weeks ago, and they lost 2 of 3 to Florida. Didn't look very good in those first 2 games either last week in Knoxville. I think, and we saw this a little bit with Arkansas last year, even though a lot of those Tennessee players are gone from last season. They've got their pitching staff back, but the players that have kind of been the glue for them for 2 years, position wise, Gilbert and Lupcius, and you go on down the line, they're gone. But the reputation remains. And I think that where I'm going with this is we saw this with Arkansas a little bit last year, where when you are the number 1 team one year and you are so dominant that you're the marquee event. It doesn't matter who you're playing, doesn't matter if the other team's good or if they're bad. You're going to get everybody's best shot the next year. And I think we saw that with Arkansas last season, and I think we're seeing that with Tennessee this year.
No, I think you're right, Matt. I think you nailed it right there. I think everyone wants to beat Tennessee just because of, how dominant they were last year. And I tell you, they didn't just beat you last year. They kind of humiliated you last year.
And they let you hear about it.
And they let you hear about it. And I think people, they don't forget that. And so they kind of have a bullseye on their back this year, and they're getting everyone's best game. And, that's part of it. It comes with the territory. I think Arkansas is a team that's kind of the same way. I think we play a different brand of baseball, though, that doesn't, we'll beat you. We're not going to humiliate you. We're not going to rub it in. But we're the big dogs on the block, and everyone wants to, they rise up and they're challenged when they play us, and they seem to play to a different level when they play the Razorbacks. But I think they play Tennessee that way for a different reason. And like I said, it goes back to kind of the way that they handled themselves last year. But you look at who they've played, and then you look at who we played. I mean, we've played Auburn, LSU, Alabama, and Ole Miss, and Alabama's record's not very good. That's a good team, though, and I'm telling you, they're gonna make some noise at the end of the year. And so I think it's pretty comparable. Our schedules, they're 5-7, we're 8-4. We're a better team. I think their starting pitching though has really hurt them. Dolander's been struggling.
Mhm.
Burns has been terrible. I don't even know if they'll keep Burns in the
Hmm.
rotation. I don't know if you've seen his numbers. His numbers are
Oh yeah,
terrible.
SEC play.
Um,
He's 0-3 and 11.94 ERA. Uh, and what's interesting is they're keeping him in some of these games. He's pitched 17 in the third inning, so they're sticking with him even through some of these struggles.
Yeah, and Drew Beam's been actually their best pitcher so
Yeah.
far. I mean, if you really look at the numbers, the Sunday guy, I mean, he's got good numbers. But if you look at what the league's doing, I tell you, we talk about it every week. SEC and the SEC league's hitting pretty well off of all these guys, especially Burns. I mean, the league's hitting 329 against Chase Burns, and so the starting pitching's let them down. Their bullpen hasn't come through for them, so it's kind of been a rough go of it for the pitching staff.
Dollander, I watched him pitch in that game against Skeens a couple of weeks ago in Baton Rouge. And one of the things that stood out to me about him, Bubba, is that he looks like he's more comfortable when he gets into the stretch. LSU, they were putting a lot of runners on against him early in the innings. Leadoff guy got on in several of the innings against him, or if a leadoff guy didn't get on, they would get a guy on with one out. There were a lot of instances where, he'd have two on, no out, two on, one out, something like that. And he'd get in the stretch and he'd get out of that jam quite often. It's interesting how some pitchers look like they're more comfortable with base runners, and that probably is why you see the major league teams really salivating over him.
Oh, I think so. And a lot of guys they get in the stretch and they pitch different. It simplifies their mechanics and they're just more comfortable out of the stretch. And some guys like having the runners on base. I mean, it's kind of you think about it, you'd be like, well, why do you want that? But you can go out there and you can execute pitches. You try to get that ground ball. So some guys are just better in that situation.
You mentioned Drew Beam, their Sunday guy. If it wasn't for him, they might have been swept the last 2 weeks, but he got off to a good start against LSU, also against Florida last week, and they were able to salvage those series. Ended up 1-2, like I mentioned earlier. One of the things that, and I don't know if I'm right about this, but I feel like when a pitcher has had a lot of success one year, there's a book on them. And these guys, Beam and Dollander and Burns, Dollander transferred in from Georgia Southern last year. The other two, I think one of them was a freshman last season. I forget who it was. And the point being that they kind of came out of nowhere to form this great pitching staff that they had last season. Do you think there's something to be said about having to go through, because you talk about when a lineup sees you for the second, third time in a game, how much better they know you. Do you think there's something to be said for seeing a lot of the same hitters, older hitters, a second year, and maybe the scouting report is better on how to attack you?
Yeah, I think so because the scouting is it's ridiculous right now, Matt. There's so much, with synergy and all the different scouting services out there. We know everything about every pitcher that comes in here. And that's one thing. But when you've got actual numbers of facing that pitcher, that specific pitcher, how he faced you the year before, I mean, it makes a big difference. And, so that, I mean, that, and it could be something, he might be tipping his pitches for all or
Hmm.
Chase Burns. A lot of guys tip pitches and they don't find out about it until the end of the year. And so, unfortunately, if there's something there, I'm sure we've seen it in Burns or one of those other guys. So hopefully we'll be able to use that. But you never really know. But yeah, I think everyone has that though. Even at this point, Hunter Holland, you look at him, he's new to the league. But they've got scouting reports on him. They've got a lot of footage on him, a lot of video. They know exactly how he pitches righties and lefties, and so that's kind of the nature of the game right now.
Real quick before we get out of here, talking about Tennessee, offensively, they haven't been great in SEC play. They're hitting 249 in conference play. They were such a great home run hitting team last year. They've got 15 home runs right now through 12 games. And some of the hitters who we thought were going to star for them this year, they have not hit great against SEC pitching. You think about Blake Burke, who's going to be a high round draft pick next year, 229 in SEC play. Zane Denton, third baseman who transferred in from Alabama, was so good for them, just 211 in SEC play. Even Maui Ahuna, who's going to be probably a first round pick this year, transferred in from Kansas, 263 in SEC play. Christian Moore a little bit better at 293. Their top two hitters in conference play are Hunter Inslee, the outfielder. He's hitting 371. He's been their most consistent hitter, and then Jared Dickey, who plays some outfield. He catches for him. He hits 318. But it's those guys. It's kind of like the Ole Miss thing we were talking about earlier. The guys that you thought would be producing for them offensively, they just haven't to this point in the year.
No, they're hitting 11th in SEC and 249 batting average, just SEC games. But the thing that really stands out for me, Matt, is their fielding percentage. They're fielding 953 as a team, and that's last in the SEC. And that's, man, you cannot give, there's not much margin for error in the SEC. And if you're giving teams extra outs, then that's going to come back to bite you. And you see it happen in Tennessee.
Tony Basilio's a radio host in Knoxville, has been for a long time. I was in his show earlier this week, and we were talking about Tennessee. He said it's been uncanny this year for Tennessee that they'll make an error and the other team will come back and make them pay. He said that he can't remember a year where teams have made Tennessee pay for their errors quite like it's happened this year. And then one of the other things that he mentioned, and I've seen this in the games that I've watched from Tennessee, I've read it in other places, is that their base running has been really bad this year. They will make a lot of outs on the bases, a lot of, and it's not a deal where they're trying to be too aggressive. It's just kind of boneheaded plays almost on the bases from what I can tell. Again, I don't watch all of their games, but just from what I've seen, that they're not a real disciplined base running team. And that might be something where Arkansas can take advantage. We've seen in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whether it be the back pick against LSU or Will McIntyre picking off a guy at first base that ended up being a big play in that game against Ole Miss the other day. Arkansas's gotten a lot better, it feels like, here in the last 2 or 3 weeks about controlling the run game, and maybe they're able to catch Tennessee a time or two.
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, Matt, when it comes to base running like that, a lot of that comes down to coaching, or lack of discipline right there. And you don't see the Razorback we don't make mistakes on the base paths like that. It's one thing, when you're giving up extra outs, making errors, but when you're on the base paths and you're giving up outs on the base paths by doing, bonehead plays or not taking advantage of a dirt ball read. Like you look at last night's game, in the first inning, we had 2 really good dirt ball reads that we executed perfectly. We just do the little things on the bases that I think that a lot of other teams don't do. And that goes back to DVH and just kind of his attention to detail that you don't see out of a lot of other SEC teams. And you have to be you're casual fan, I don't think notices stuff like that. But if you're a real baseball fan, you notice all the little things we do that other teams don't do. And I know I sound like a broken record, but at the end of the day, that wins.
Well, we're nitpicking Tennessee a little bit, but this is still a dangerous team.
Oh, they are. I mean, once again, it's kind of like what I said about Ole Miss last year or last week, Matt. I mean, they're coming in here with a 5-7 SEC record. That doesn't mean anything. When they come to town, Vitale is going to have those guys ready to play. Mm-hmm. It's going to be crazy loud there. Weather's going to be great. Ball marker's going to be packed. It can either fire Tennessee up, or they could have the pucker factor and we get swept and go home. But I just think Vitale is going to have these guys ready to play when they come to town.
These are the weekends that you live for college baseball. I mean, you usually only get maybe 1 or 2, if you're lucky, 3 weekends like this a year, just in terms of the build up. And then, we'll see how the games play out, but just, the build up, the crowd, everything that goes into it. You don't get this very often. This is what you wait the whole off season for.
Oh, I can't wait. And, the best thing about it is you can look and say, okay, the weather looks good. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you got these big buildups and you're like, oh, it's 80% chance of rain on Saturday. Well, right now it looks really good. So it's the perfect storm for us to pack ball marker out. I hope we get a record crowd on Friday or Saturday, especially Saturday. Man, I can't wait, Matt. It's going to be fun.
One more thing, Arkansas 21-2 at home this year, going into the game against Little Rock this afternoon. Tennessee just 1-6 in true road games. You add in neutral site games. They played a couple of neutral site games in Arizona to start the year. just 2-7 away from home. So Tennessee has been a much different team away from Lindsey Nelson Stadium than they've been on the road, or than they have been there at home. And Arkansas has been really good at Baum this year. They look really comfortable playing in that ballpark. Razorbacks in Tennessee, 2 games at night this weekend. They'll play Friday night, they'll play Saturday night, and then they'll play Sunday afternoon. Hope you come to wholehogsports.com and read our coverage leading up to that series, also after the Wednesday game against Little Rock. And you can hear Phil and Bubba in the press box, right? Not in the outfield.
We're back in the press box.
All right. You can hear them on the Razorback Sports Network throughout the weekend. We appreciate you joining us on the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast, and we'll see you next week to recap the Tennessee series. For Bubba Carpenter, I'm Matt Jones. Have a good week, everyone.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.